for melodic heavy metal. Playing it heavier, louder, raunchier, faster. This is the Signals of Intuition.
Run for your life! Breaking down negotiations! Run for your life! Leading to the confrontation!
That was brand new Impellitteri right there from their latest record, Nature of the Beast. That was Run for Your Life. You're listening to the Signals of Intuition, your home for melodic hard rock and heavy metal. And tonight on the show, we've got the guitar player of that band, Mr. Chris Impellitteri, who's been the leader of that band for over 30 years now. In addition to that, he also plays in a anime metal project he did about 5-10 years ago called Animetal USA. So let's get Chris on the line right now.
Hello?
Hey, Chris, it's Brandon calling from the Signals of Intuition in Windsor, Detroit. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well, Brandon. And Detroit, I love that.
Yes, well, I'm actually in Windsor across the river, but close enough. They're right next to each other.
Close enough, exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm over there, for concerts and things, shopping and that kind of thing all the time. So, I mean, I, sort of feel like an honorary American, even though I'm not one, so.
Well framed.
So when I do these, I always like to start at the beginning of you as a musician and then work our way up to the new material. So starting from the beginning, where did you grow up and how did you get started in music?
So, where I began music, I mean, first of all, let me explain. So I grew up in a place called Ledyard, Connecticut. It's about an hour outside of New York City. It's actually in between New York and Boston.
Oh, okay.
And so, I grew up there. I started playing guitar around, I think it was like 12 years old, something like that. And, I had a little bit of a tragedy. I lost my parents when I was like 9, not for the violin story, but,
geez. Yeah.
No, it's totally cool. It's been many years. It's no big deal. But so my grandparents, thank God, they were young. They were awesome. And, they knew at that point, I was like, we got to get this kid to do something or else his life's probably going to go down the wrong path, especially, you go through something tragic at 9.
Sure.
So basically, my grandmother, I'll never forget, she basically took me to some guitar store in Connecticut. And basically on the wall was a copy of a Les Paul and a copy of a Stratocaster. And I chose one of them. And basically from that moment on, I started taking guitar lessons, studying theory. And that's kind of how I got into this whole thing.
And were you heavily into music at that point? Like, I'm guessing probably like the Beatles, that kind of thing, or was it not really a big part of your life?
No, that would have been my parents' generation. No, I was much more into. So 12 years old, I think my grandmother bought tickets for me and my friends to our first concert. The very first concert we saw was Kiss Destroyer. So that was the very first concert I had ever seen. And as far as music at 12 years old, probably one of the first records I ever bought. Actually, it probably was Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous.
Nice.
I think that was one of the first records I ever bought. Of course, Led Zeppelin. I think I got Led Zeppelin 4. I was much too young when it first came out, but when I found out about it and started hearing it, then I think I got that. Especially, stuff. I mean, just their collection of stuff was great. The riffs, all of that stuff. So I got that. I think Queen was another early one. The one with Tie Your Mother Down and all that stuff, Stone Cold Crazy. I mean, I loved all that. So that's kind of like the early stuff that I got on my own. And, this is really in the beginning. I mean, at this point, I'm in, 6th grade or something like that. And so, I'm really kind of learning the basics. I had a great guitar teacher who was really he was a monster guitar player. He was kind of like a local Guitar Hero type guy. Very disciplined, really knew his theory, but also was just had a great feel in the way he played. So that was also a benefit for me, at least starting. So that's kind of the beginning of it all.
And then from there, take me through sort of like, did you have the typical, high school band, that kind of thing, play dances and so forth? Or how did you start forming bands and all that?
Oh, yeah. So I think in 7th grade, I did my very first dance. We had a band, and believe it or not, it was actually called Exodus, like the thrash band. We didn't know anything. I mean, they didn't exist yet, so that was the name of the band. We played a lot of stuff. I mean, I think we played, oh gosh, what did we do? We were doing stuff like Boston, Styx, Foreigner, Led Zeppelin, Queen, that early stuff, again, we're in 7th grade. So Chicago was another big one. I think we used to do a lot of that stuff. It was fun. I mean, I still have, it's funny talking to you about that. I haven't thought about that in 20 years. Matter of fact, you're probably the first person that has asked this question. It's a really fun question. Kind of going back. I'm trying not to manipulate fact or truth, right? I'm trying to really remember this. It's been so many years, right?
Of course.
But I do remember it. It was a lot of fun. We also did like the local, like the talent shows. I remember that stuff was a blast.
So you said you guys did Chicago. Was it like a 4-piece rock band? Did you guys have a horn section to be able to play that sort of stuff?
No. It was 5-piece. Yeah. So usually I think it was lead singer, 2 guitar players, bass player, and drummer, and that was it. So yeah, there were no horns. Guitar players, a lot of times we would do the horn parts, but in harmony.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Or even then just play a lead or something for what kind of the melody would be, eh? Something like that.
Exactly. But a lot of times you'll have 1-3-5 with the horns anyway, so be a fun way for us to have the excuse to go into break into harmony solos.
And then, so take me from sort of your school days. When you got into high school, did you start, playing bars and that kind of thing and building your way up?
Yeah, I did. So probably, and it was really difficult. I almost didn't make it out of high school or graduate high school because I was at this point, by the time 8th grade happened, pre-high school, that was it. I was hooked. At this point, I think Van Halen had come out. Once I heard Van Halen, it was over. I just want to be like, I want to be like Eddie, whatever. So I was addicted. I was playing, like 12 hours a day. Sometimes I wouldn't even go to school. I just play my guitar all day long. My grandmother would be like yelling at me, saying, "You have to go to school," and I'd be like, "No, I'm learning, eruption or whatever, So it was quite fun during that period of time. But yeah, high school, I started playing in the bar bands, right? And I think I was about 15 years old when I first started playing bars, believe it or not. I was way underage, so they had to sneak me in, to the clubs. At this point, I guess I was fortunate. I really had developed as a guitar player very early on. So all the older guys seemed to want me in their band. And so I ended up being in a couple different bands in New England. And this is a weird story. This is going to sound very crazy to most people that know the way, especially the way I play guitar. They always throw me in with all these shred guys, right? But what people don't know is in 1981, there was a band in New England. They were a massive tribute band to AC/DC. It was called QT Hush, and they were huge. I opened for them in this band. And the band I played in, we did a lot of stuff like Ozzy covers, like Diary of a Madman and all that really cool stuff. A lot of Van Halen, a lot of Queen, the heavy stuff from Queen. And so we opened for them. And this band, when I say massive, it was insane. These bands, remember, this is a tribute band. How goofy is that? These guys were playing like 3,000-seat venues and selling the things out. It was incredible. I was like, oh my God. So they asked me, would you be interested? Your guitar player doing Angus quit. And they said, do you want to do this? And now remember, I'm like, at this point, I think I'm in 11th grade or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, man, girls. You guys, it's packed everywhere. So I'll do it, Of course, I changed everything, all the solos. I'm playing like really fast, like Gary Moore's kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're not playing any of the, and I love Angus, but not playing any of his solos. I'm doing all this technical stuff. But it was fun. It worked. And so I did that for literally like 2 years. And because of that, I barely made it out of high school because this band was playing 5 nights a week all over New England. You'd play like one day you'd be in New York City, the next day you'd be up in Boston, and it was just insane, the draw these guys had. It was funny. So that was kind of it. And then, but it was good for me too, because what I did learn is I learned how to play in front of people. People don't realize, I guess musicians, we all at some point get a break, but people don't realize that you master technique. But now it's another thing when you get in front of an audience staring at you, especially when they're larger audiences, So that was one thing that really helped me, really kind of helped me get trained in that kind of environment.
That's one thing. It's funny because I always tell musicians that exactly that is I say, okay, you know how to play. Go take like a drama class or something. Go take something where you have to stand in front of people. And when you watch bands, forget listening to what the dude's doing, but watch how he interacts and watch how he moves, because that's the other half of the equation that most musicians, especially when you're starting out, people totally forget about, is that aspect of being on stage, the performance.
Well, absolutely. Remember, we are performers, right? That's a huge component of what we do. And having said that, the audience comes to be entertained. But at the same time, now me as a musician, my focus is on being a great guitar player, if that's possible. So I spend my time on stage both trying to have fun with the audience, but also being cognizant of make sure you're playing really well because they paid to see this. So you want to impress them if that's possible. It's people, again, when I first started doing some of my shows early on, now remember, I mean, we can get into this later, but obviously Impellitteri is much bigger overseas than we are in the U.S. But there are periods of time where even in my life early on, some of the stuff is pretty intimidating. You walk out early on when you're first doing this. I remember in my early 20s, we were playing places where all of a sudden you're walking out in front of 8,000 to 10,000 people, and we're playing technical stuff, and it's a little intimidating. So you have to learn how to control yourself emotionally so you can then play physically perfect,
Yeah. So, okay, so you're playing in this AC/DC tribute band, so I'm guessing you're probably like 19, 20, something like that, right? Is kind of when that all sort of fell apart?
Well, I started at 17, so yeah, by the time it was done, I was probably about 19. And at that point, there was the lead singer, who was really cool. He decided that let's start an original band. And we still had, in New England, the rule, you weren't playing any of the big, clubs or theaters unless you did covers. So we had to still do that. But instead of doing AC/DC, now we were back to doing Ozzy and Van Halen and Queen and, Deep Purple and all the really cool stuff I loved, Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
So we did that, but we also started mixing original music in. And somewhere soon after, I quit, and I decided I'm going to L.A. So I came out in L.A. Originally, I think it was 1985, somewhere around there. And I came out, and at this point, the scene had already kind of dispersed. This is after, obviously, long after Van Halen and Quiet Riot and Motley Crue and all those bands. That stuff had started to fizzle, but I came out, met a lot of people. I was kind of disappointed with LA at first. All this hype about, you got to go to the Whiskey A Go-Go and Gazzarri's, and when you first go there, you go, this is the dump.
Yeah.
These bands aren't anywhere nearly as good as I thought they were going to be, that kind of thing, So I went back home, and that was a blessing, because when I went back home, I started to look around for bands, and I remember one night I was in Connecticut at some big club, and Rob Rock was opening. He had a band, and people don't realize Rob Rock, that's really his real birth name. So people always goof on him, saying, oh, that's so lame, dude, cheesy. But it's really his name. It's Robert Allen Rock. So we had a band called the Robert Allen Rock Band, and they were opening for Greg Allman of the Allman Brothers. And I was there at the show, and I was like, this guy's really good. So afterwards, after the show, we started talking. And I said, hey, look, I'm looking to put something together. And somehow I guess they were looking for a new guitar player. They were going to make some changes. So we agreed to get together, I think the following weekend, and rehearse. And as soon as we did, there was chemistry there, musically speaking. Something about the way we worked together, there's just a positive, forward momentum energy there. So that was it. So we ended up putting together a bar band called Vice, and we became huge in New England. Every big band, to this day, I've had big bands come through and go, man, you guys used to be in that band Vice, right? It's like everybody used to come see us, right? They wanted to go see the guitar player or the singer or whatever. And so we got a big following. And towards the end of it, I was pushing the band. I was like, dude, we got to go to L.A. We got to bring this to L.A. And they were kind of complacent. A lot of the band guys were like, no, we don't want to go out to L.A. And they also, I think because I was like the unruly child of the band, I was much younger than everybody.
Yeah.
I think they thought I was an arrogant little dick. Forgive my language, but so they were like, nah, we're not going to LA, and I think they fired me. so I said, screw it. So off I went to LA, and I don't know what happened, but at some point I'm out in LA rehearsing, and I think Rudy Sarzo was looking for a guitar player in his thing or whatever, and I heard something about they needed a new singer, and I was back in Connecticut because my grandfather had gotten sick. So I went back, but I told someone about Rob. I said, well, then check Rob out. I don't think he's doing anything right now either. And he was brought out to L.A. to be in this band with Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge. And they did one record. It was a good record, but unfortunately it didn't go anywhere.
Was that Driver, I think?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And so, they released a record, but unfortunately it wasn't, it didn't have any momentum. And Rudy and Tommy quit to join Whitesnake, as we all know, at least people in the industry.
Yep.
And so at that point, I said, Rob, one more chance. This is it. We're getting back together. And that's where this whole thing, Impellitteri, begins. We end up writing and recording the Impellitteri Black EP.
Yeah. Oh,
and we didn't have a lot of money. Thanks, man. I still love that. It's very raw. So when people listen to it, if you listen to our new records, Venom, this new record, The Nature of the Beast, these are huge productions. These are big sounding. That record, the Impellitteri Black EP, which is our first album we ever made, it's almost a live record, and I love it. It's so much energy, and I've had every mega band tell me, dude, I love that record. I've got that record. I've been bands from Dio guys to Metallica or whatever. Everybody had that record. And so, Rob and I, when we did that record, I knew we have a really good writing relationship as well. And I think that people could hear that in that record. So that's kind of how we evolved into this band. That was the beginning.
So now, do you view, because I mean, I know, like, essentially you've had sort of the same band over, 25, like, people think of you as like kind of like an Yngwie, I guess, because of A, the shred, and B, the name, But, I mean, I've always kind of thought of you as a band as opposed to like sort of a project where every record you do something different. You know what I mean? Like, you've had the same bass player for
Brandon, Brandon, thanks. Listen, that's absolutely correct. I'm glad you brought that up because I get frustrated at this. I will be very clear. Impellitteri is a band. It has never, ever been a solo artist. I'm not the egotistical guitar player that sticks the band in the corner or whatever, right? We are 4 individuals. They could fire me and still call it Impellitteri. We are, each guy has an equal contribution and voice to this band, right? I mean, James has been with us since 1991 or 90. Rob and I have been on and off, but for the most part, we've been kind of like the glue to the band. But, I've always told people, look, without Rob and James, you wouldn't like this music, right? I mean, it's like, good. There are some people, yes, I get it. They like my guitar playing or whatever, but there are plenty of people that could care less. They'd rather hear a great vocalist. So having said that, Impellitteri has always been a band, and it's collective 4 guys. We come together, we communicate through our music or our instruments or whatever, and the end result is what you guys hear, right, as the listener. And that's far off from a solo artist, as far as I can tell.
Of course, yeah. Now, it's funny, sort of on that note, to take a 180 look at one album that isn't like that at all, is the Stand in Line record. That was done with completely different people, obviously. Like, that is sort of like a project in essence. But so how do you go from, like, you had Rob Rock on the EP, then you get Graham Bonnet for the first full-length album, and then Rob Rock's kind of more or less been in ever since. How did you guys come to work with Graham Bonnet on that record, and how did that whole thing come together?
Okay, so going back from the beginning, so we do the Impellitteri Black EP, we get a deal with Sony and Relativity. We had a PR guy that was really good, and all of a sudden, the EP got a lot of attention back then. This is around 1986, I believe. Kerrang! Magazine out of England, they were all over that record. It blew up. They gave it, like, they were important for, like, ratings back then. So 5-star was about as good as you could get. So they gave us 5 stars. And all of a sudden, everybody in the metal community around the world were going, who's this band, whatever. And so we got a lot of attention, right? And everybody was coming to see us. We'd play live shows in L.A., and it got really quite popular. And we had signed a deal. And then all of a sudden, I get the meeting time with Rob, and he decides he wants to quit. And I'm like, oh, my God, we're blowing up, and the integral part of this band is quitting. And he basically, at that point, he was Christian. He wanted to do more something that was Christian-based. And there was a band that was working in Germany that had a producer that was doing, the producer was the guy doing all the Scorpion stuff. So he thought that would be a better way for him to go. So he quit. And at this point, I'm like, oh my God, I'm under contract. I have to deliver a record. What do I do? Well, about 2 years earlier than that, Graham and his band, he had a band called Alcatraz that in the early 80s, they were huge in LA and those places, and Yngwie was their guitar player. So they called me and asked me if I'd be interested in replacing Yngwie. And to be honest, I was too young. I think Steve Vai eventually got the gig. These guys were way older than me. So we both went on our thing. And I went in to become who I am today, right? Just dedicated, play my guitar 12 hours a day and master this. But I kind of remained friends with Graham. They call me, say hi to me all the time. And so basically, when Rob left, I don't know what prompted me. I don't know why, but I basically picked up the phone and said, dude, what are you doing? And he was like, nothing. I said, look, I'm under contract. I have to deliver a record. You want to do something? He goes, absolutely, I'm in. I'm like, okay. So here was the problem. If you listen to the Impellitteri Black EP, I've always considered us, that's the cement, the foundation of what we started at. And kind of what we still sound like today, which I always have thought of us more as kind of like Iron Maiden or Judas Priest around the Hellion time, but on steroids. Almost like melodic thrash metal with all these crazy technical, classical shredding guitar solos, right? Screaming vocals and etc. But with Graham, I couldn't write like that. Graham was already established. Think about it. He was a legendary rock star with the band Rainbow, right? He had a really big, successful solo career, which most people don't know. And then, of course, Alcatraz was his baby, and he had a lot of success. So when we did Stand in Line, it was like I couldn't do Lost in the Rain and Burning and songs like that the way I did it with Rob, with Graham, because he's a different type of singer. So someone suggested, look, why don't you do something more based around what he had done historically? And to be honest, it was difficult because that wasn't my full influence of what I was into. So I had to kind of somehow change what I was doing and try to figure out a way to do it more based on what he was doing instead of me. And it was hard. It was better yet, it was uncomfortable. Now, I listen back many years later and I go, you know what? Stand in Line, the song, I really like a lot. We play it live and people go nuts over it. So they're really happy with it. But as a guitar player and a metal fan, like this 15-year-old me goes, yeah, it's okay. There's like 3 songs on that record I really love. The rest of it, so-so. I hate the mix. They buried my guitar solos and reverb, which I've hated to this day. But I also have to be grateful. That record got us on MTV. We've now sold millions of records. Japan, I really contribute a lot of our success to the Graham Bonnet factor. I think about this. Graham before me, this is not going to be for the average rock listener or people that don't have a clue of musicians, but in the guitar world, right? I think about Graham. He plays with Ritchie Blackmore, who's, Deep Purple, right? Rainbow, a legendary guitar player. From there, he plays with Michael Schenker, another legendary guitar player, right? Scorpions, UFO, all that. From there, Yngwie. From Yngwie to Steve Vai, from Steve Vai to me. So, for me, I think in Japan, we could have done the worst album ever, and for some reason, I think they may have embraced us just because Graham was our lead singer, right? Like success by association. Now, luckily for me, I knew the Black EP already had gotten a lot of traction in Japan, right? So they had already, we were already in the guitar magazines on the covers and winning polls and all of that stuff. So I had already kind of, at least as a musician, had already established myself. But to this day, I still think Graham had a huge factor in why we became so successful in that country, right? And so, at the end of the day, I'm glad we did it versus not doing it, even though the record does pain me a lot of times when I think about it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd still consider that among my favorite of your albums, but yeah, it is a different record as far as what you guys are typically known for sure. It definitely has.
Yeah, and there were other, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it sort of has that a little bit more, I guess, melodic kind of, a little bit bluesier, but it's still heavy. It's still metal, but it definitely is kind of its own thing in your discography. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the other side, listen, now, as I listen back, Graham Bonnet did an amazing job. Pat Torpey, unfortunately, Pat's no longer with us, right? But Pat Torpey did an incredible job.
I interviewed him not long before he passed, and we talked about this record, and I was like, how did you wind up in Impellitteri? And according to him, it was just kind of, he's sort of like he knew Mike Varney, I think, or something, and I forget the story now how he even wound up.
No, actually, the person you just mentioned, I have never, ever been on that label or associated with that person. I really don't even know him. So no, Pat actually came through Chuck Wright. Chuck Wright was playing with a band called Quiet Riot, and they had finished Metal Health, and then Rudy rejoined the band, and Chuck was out, and he was doing other projects. So somehow Chuck ended up doing Stand in Line with us, and he had brought in Pat Torpey. He goes, hey, I want to introduce you to a friend. At the time, I remember the drummer Matt Sorum really wanted to do it. Matt, the one who ended up in Guns N' Roses. So, but Pat came in, he played, he was amazing. And, we started building the record really as a team. But I'll tell you, in all sincerity, and I don't have a problem saying this publicly, it was hard for me because these guys were way older than me. Graham was 18 years older than me. Chuck, Pat, all those guys were a lot older than me. And so for me, again, here I am. I lost Rob. I lost kind of my direction of what I really wanted to do, right? And here I'm playing with guys that are so much older than me that emotionally it was really hard to identify and relate to. So I really felt like almost like the little kid in the room now being guided, whereas when we did the Impellitteri Black EP that started all, I was really the guiding ship, right? And in partnering with Rob. So it was hard on me. And, unfortunately, Graham, too, at that time, even though I think Graham sounds amazing on Stand in Line. When I listen to it today and I go, my God, listen to that vocal. He's one of the greatest vocals out there. Whether people love him or hate him, I've seen him. I've seen him in all conditions, and he's one of the greatest vocalists out there, bar none. But at that time, he was, there were a lot of issues with alcohol to the point where we couldn't work days. It was difficult. So that was it. And, I will tell you, but years later, I don't know how many people know this because we only did it for Europe and Japan. We decided there was a period where Rob, I guess we can get to that later if we're doing the evolution, but, where Rob eventually would leave again for a short period of time to do solo records. And I called Graham back and I said, we're going to do this one more time, but this time I'm doing Impellitteri music my way, right? The aggressive shredding, almost thrashy. And then you're going to sing your way and we're going to see if this is going to work. And we did a record called System X, which in Japan and Europe, it was really well received. I love that more than Stand in Line.
Oh, it was great. Yep.
So anyways, so that's the Stand in Line thing.
And then, okay, so a couple years go by, and then Rob came back, obviously, and you had your current bass player, I think by that point, right? Because that would have been, it was 92. Was that Grin and Barrett was the next album? I think it was.
Yeah, that was around 91 or 92. Now, actually, Chuck Wright and Ken Mary play on the Grin and Barrett record.
You're right.
And at that point, and in that record, there's some songs I really love, like Power of Love, When the Well Runs Dry, but that was something fun to do because at that point, the whole, the metal scene, the 80s thing had really died off. Guns N' Roses were really relevant, and I remember we were really impressioned by that. So we did Grin and Barrett. We really wanted to take our technique, and all, the virtuoso stuff that we were kind of achieving, the singing and all of that stuff, except now make it more groove-oriented. So Grin and Barrett was a fun record for that reason. It was really more like, hey, for all the people that say we senselessly wank on our instruments and whatever, this was a fun time to prove them, but we can do the other stuff too. More Guns N' Roses, early Aerosmith kind of vibe. And really that was Grin and Barrett. So that was the first record where Rob and I are back together, and James doesn't come in quite yet. We actually do that record with Chuck Wright on bass and Ken Mary from Alice Cooper on drums. And the record, I got to be honest, Japan did not like it. They actually hated it. They loved the song Power of Love, Ball and Chain, and When the Rollins Dry, but the rest of it was almost funk rock. They hated it. They were like, what are you doing? You're Impellitteri. We want the Black EP, or we want more of the gothic, classical influence stuff. So record company calls us and says, look, we're going to give you another shot at this, but we want to do an EP. Do it your way again, back to your original sound. From there, we do a Black EP called Victim of the System. And Victim of the System, to me, it almost sounds like a ripoff of Stone Cold Crazy by Queen. I think Metallica did a cover of it as well. But that record we were back. Shredding, the Queen vocals all over it, speed metal, it had every element that Impellitteri really is. From that point on, we never looked back. From there, Japan loved it. We followed up with a record called Answer to the Master, which I think in the first week in Japan, first day, sold something like 100,000 records.
Oh, my God.
It did really well for us. And all of a sudden, now comes the touring. And now we're playing massive venues. We're making an insane amount of money. Just life changed overnight. And from there, we never looked back. We stuck with our guns and kind of pretty much stuck with the kind of music that we started with that Black EP.
Yeah. It's funny. I was going to ask this later on, but since we're kind of talking about Japan, I'm always curious about this because, like, bands like yourself, bands like Mr. Big, talking about Pat Torpy, Yngwie, like, there's all these guys who have a massive following in Japan that for some reason never seem to click, especially in North America, sometimes maybe not even Europe. What do you think it is about Japan that just kind of clicks with your music? It doesn't seem to work here.
Well,
at least not anywhere near the scale.
It's really the infrastructure. You have to understand that in the U.S., there's a lot of bias. It's a good old boys club, right? And I'm being serious about this. The record companies control everything. Same thing with big management companies. So in Japan, I think one of the reasons we had success, same thing with Mr. Big, I think it's a cultural issue. Because if you think about the way I play guitar, or guys like Paul Gilbert, right, we're pretty schooled. We understand our theory. We're very disciplined in our approach. And I say this on the outside. I'm not saying I'm the greatest guitar player in the world. If people say I'm the greatest or I'm the fastest or whatever, that's them saying it, not me. But having gone down this road, I do aware, yes, I can play very, very well. And I guess I'm just very accomplished at what I do. And I understand that. In Japan, I think because they're very education-based, very academic, they appreciate things that have a discipline to it. right? So if you're a classical pianist, they want to know that you've mastered these concepts, and they appreciate that work. So in Japan, even though, yes, we're, almost like an Iron Maiden or Priest on steroids as far as our music sounds, when you get to the guitar solo or the way you listen to Rob sing, you can tell it takes a lot of effort to do that. We just didn't wake up one day and, I can play this fast and this technically accurate with, and compose like this. It takes a lot of education, a lot of work. I think they really love that. I think that's part of the secret, at least of our success. They realize that if you're going to do this, it's like being an athlete. You've got to train. You have to have some genetics, obviously, some natural abilities, but a lot of it's work. And so they appreciate that stuff. That's probably why we went on to sell so many records and do what we did in Japan. In America, that's a different story. A lot of this is controlled. I mean, I just look at the way people talk in America. You read like, what's that site?
Blabbermouth?
What's that thing? Yeah, I'm sorry. That's it. Yes, Blabbermouth. So occasionally you read the comments and you just listen to them and it's just senseless bickering. Oh, you suck, or you play too fast, or you're a wanker, only listen to Anthrax or Slayer or whatever. And I'm like, that's juvenile delinquents. It's like, but that's people trying to convince other people. They're trying to control your opinion. In Japan, it doesn't work that way. It's kind of like freedom of thought and speech. If something's good, they gravitate towards it. Here, it seems like people do everything in their power to control perception and influence over what we get fed. And I think that's why our type of music, look, if you think about it, and again, I'm not being offensive to any of the Cookie Monster vocal bands. I like a lot of the stuff. I think it's pretty cool. But having said that, if you think about it, I come out of an era where like guys like Bruce Dickinson rule the world, right? You have to sing. Rob Rock, you've got to sing. In the 90s, I will never forget, we had looked at a couple management companies. I think one was Rick Sales, who managed Slayer, and I forget the other guy, but they were really big managers. And I remember they laughed at us. One of them said, I loved the music. And he goes, but your vocals sound like Boston or Queen. And I was like, oh, man, thanks. And I literally said, thanks. And he was like, no, you don't understand. It's not a compliment. I mean, what do you mean? He goes, well, listen to the bands, and they're playing us like Slayer or something, right? And nothing against Slayer. Slayer's very cool. But, dude, I mean, give me a break. You guys can't sing. And you need talent. And I think what happened in the 90s, it really became a period of time where, you know what? It is really hard to find a Rob Rock or a Bruce Dickinson or a Ronnie James Dio, but it's pretty easy to do the Cookie Monster shit. And listen, I don't mean to be, I'm not, because I could come off as an arrogant jerk for saying that, but I'm telling you, I'm not saying anything other people aren't saying. I mean, I used to hear Ronnie Dio talk about all these people in the 90s that say he was an influence, and he would be laughing at it. These guys are doing the Cookie Monster stuff, or, they have no range whatsoever, and they're talking about he's the influence. We're like, really? So, but having said that, it was all of a sudden easy for labels and management companies to put all these bands together, these hardcore bands, right? And all of a sudden, this is where I got angry. All of a sudden, guys like Rob Rock, they're making fun of. They're condemning. They're putting down. Oh, you're a pussy. You sing like a chick. Really? It's like, you mean because he can sing, and he's insanely good.
Yeah.
And so I at that point, there was some poetic justice, though, because in the U.S., obviously, bands like us were pretty much cast aside, right? So all of whatever the 90s bands were, they all became the most relevant flavor of the moment. Well, we still needed a market, so maybe because we were forced to find other territories, that was a godsend, because now we had to focus on Japan, right, and some places in Europe. And there, all of a sudden, again, I look back now and go, oh, my God, we've sold millions of records. How did we get here? How do we do this? This is insane to me, right? When we should have been condemned and cast out completely the way the good old boys club or the industry was treating everybody in our genre, sorry, I can't speak.
Yeah, it's all good.
So
I'm sure you've been
anyway,
talking all day with interviews. It's all good.
Yeah. But so anyway, so that's my kind of my thought on, the whole vocal abilities and, some of the things of why the U.S. markets have been more difficult. But I will tell you, we argue with promoters all the time. We're always, like last year, we did some amazing venues. We did some big festivals when we were touring behind Venom. We did some of the stuff with I think Maiden were headlining. And these are things where we're playing for like 35,000 people in Spain. Germany was monstrous. And we played really well. And then the last show we did, we headlined Busan Rock Festival in South Korea. And our bass player, James, couldn't go. So my buddy Rudy Sarzo the dude from Ozzy, he basically learned the whole set, spent a week with me rehearsing, went over and played, and we drew like 90,000 people. It was insane.
Oh my God.
Even Rudy,
Wow.
I think he saw, it's like, oh my, yeah, it's not, you can go YouTube, like Impellitteri Warrior or whatever, and just hit BUSAN, it's there. So when we did that, it was just kind of like, I don't know, it feels like we got our justice. You know, we know we have countries where we can work. And where I'm going with the U.S., so we try to say, hey, look, promoters, we know we get on a weekly basis, we get hundreds of kids going, when are you ever going to play the U.S., right? We get that all the time. And for us, to be fair to the promoters, we're not a club band. So they know if we're going to do it, it's going to be theaters. And I think the promoters, and again, I'm going to be very fair to them, they're probably terrified. They don't know, can we fill up a 2,000 or 3,000 seat venue, or are 3 people going to show up, right? Which means they're going to lose money.
Right.
So I don't know how to convince them. I tell them, look, we've done secret shows in LA before we go overseas to do the big venues. And I say secret, we try to keep it really low. Don't advertise it. I remember years back, we did the Whiskey A Go-Go, like on a Wednesday or something, right? Just secret. And we were going to play at like 9 or 10 that night, which we did. And I remember pulling up to the venue probably like around 2 o'clock in the afternoon to do sound check. And there was a line going around the block trying to get into the venue for the show that night. I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, and this is trying to keep it on the low. So it tells me, yeah, I think we probably have a ability to draw and fill venues, but you really have to convince the promoters because they're the ones that have to invite us. If they don't invite us, we're unwelcome guests. We can't come. So that's the problem really with us in the U.S.
Do you guys have any plans to tour on the new album, or is it still?
Oh yeah,
you know,
no.
You guys are sort of in that.
No, we're going to tour. We're absolutely touring. We're definitely doing. I mean, Japan is normal. We always do that in every cycle. We'll do continental Europe. We'll do all of that. The U.S. is the big missing link. I really want to do the U.S. mainly because friends, whatever, they've wanted to see us do this for years here. And our new record, people seem to be, at least what they're telling me so far, they're really digging it. So it's a good record to tour behind.
I'm liking it. I'll be honest, I've heard maybe 60% of it. I haven't had a chance to fully digest it, but the couple songs I've heard, like I've been listening to the new single, I've heard that a bunch. That's great. Some of the other stuff is outstanding though. It's great. I'm liking
thanks. That's kind of, you know, to be honest, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. For me, I've not only writing and recording and living with it for 2 years every single day. Between you and I won't know for another 3 years when I'm, you know, after we tour and I'm making maybe another record. Then at that point I have fresh ears and I can listen back and either go, oh my God, they're right, it's great, or oh my God, that sucked, what were we thinking, you know? I'm literally at that stage right now because I don't know. I don't have any perspective. I can tell you it's a lot of fun to play. As an artist, I love playing the songs, but that's just me.
Okay, so let's obviously touch on the new record. So did you guys do, I mean, you've got the same, I think, mixer as Venom, right? Like pretty much it seems like it's sort of the pieces of Venom are back again for another round.
Yeah, same team. It is all Venom. It's the same people. It's so Rob's on vocal, I'm on guitar, James is on bass, and John Deddy played the drums on that. We had a couple of other people helping out with that. And then Greg really mixed it. The only new guy we brought in Mike Plotnikoff.
Yes,
who had
I
produced
wanted to
Van
ask you about him.
Halen,
Oh my God, he's
AC/DC.
done a million.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't even. How is he to work
he's
with?
great.
Like, so tell me, like, as a producer, is he very hands-on? I mean, I'm sure you know what you want to achieve already. You guys have done X amount of records, but you know, some producers are very hands-on. Some just want to do more. Let me set the mics up and go. You know, what is he like in the producer chair?
Well, Mike really worked. He worked as the engineer, not really as the producer. So he came in, and we basically spent, I don't know how many days with him, but, you know, really getting the foundation, the drums, you know, getting the basic sounds down, really with Mike. And he was good. He was fast. He loved the band. I mean, he basically was like, oh, my God, this stuff's great, blah, blah, blah. And he seemed to have a blast, you know. So that was kind of my experience with Mike. I mean, he's a legendary guy, no doubt. I mean, he's worked not only with a lot of the new metal bands, but he's also worked with so many of the, you know, legacy iconic artists as well, you know. I think he even produced an Aerosmith record, right? So he's done everything. Van Halen, of course, you know. So that's it, you know. And, you know, for me, it's like when I work with people, it's not really, I don't really care about your name. It's not important to me if you've been behind a 50 million selling record, Thriller or whatever. What I want to know is that you can make us sound big. You can capture our live energy, our spirit, right? If you can do that, then I know that you're going to be an asset to us.
Tell me this. I know Venom you did at NRG Did you use that same studio again, or what was the recording process?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Exact same studio. Yeah, we're back in Energy. Yeah, it's a great room. I love that. I mean, obviously, I think the last Linkin Park was done in that room. It's big. It's not cheap. It's extremely expensive, actually. What's that?
I bet. I've been there. I went to a Stephen Slate party a couple years ago, and I was just like, oh boy, this place is nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. They got this great vintage, Neve console, big tracking room where you can set up all the amps. Matter of fact, on my Facebook page, I think they posted like some video footage of this basically in the studio when all the equipment was set up and all of that, so people can kind of see it. It was, it's a great room, and I like that because we live in an age now where everybody's basically doing records, sending files to each other. I didn't want to be like that. For me, I wanted to create more of a live, let's capture the band. So when you're listening to the record, you're in the room with us. You're on the stage with us. That to me is a much more true feeling than, hey, let's do everything with a drum machine and put everything on a grid and Pro Tools and, chop everything to death. And by the time you're listening to it, it's like you're listening to a computer music, dude. You're not listening to a band. With us, you're listening to a band. Now, there's times, yes, with technology, we're doing things. We might isolate and do the drums over again by itself, but the live performance is always there. The context of what we're doing is always about live, and then build around that.
That's a great way to work. It's interesting. I was talking with Warren Hewart, who's done Aerosmith and Ace Frehley and all kinds of stuff, and that was his big recommendation. He's like, you want to do something interesting in music these days, turn the click track off and just see what you can do as a band. Like when you guys track, I'm guessing, are you guys still doing it to a click?
Oh yeah, now that's true. We absolutely do, because that's probably the schooled musicians in us. Just like an orchestra, you always have a leader, right? Conductor, really, when you see that stick going, whether it's 30-second note triplets or whatever, I mean, there's time being kept. Now, there is a trick. You've got to learn how to play, weave in and out of the click. That's how you get that human feel, right? Now, preferably, yeah, I mean, if you're doing something more raw, I prefer not to use any click whatsoever. But because we do a lot of stuff that's very technical, we need that center. That center keeps us going. So if I'm playing something really fast at 200 BPM, you're doing something like Vivaldi, that kind of solo, you need that center to kind of work off of. That's kind of like my conductor guiding me.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like that, though, to kind of weave in and out of the click. It's a very interesting way to put it. Now, talking gear, obviously, what did you use both to record the album, and then what do you use in a live situation? What are you playing?
So on this record, 90% of that is that blood-splattered Charvel that you see in the video Run for Your Life. That guitar is insane. The guitar was, and it's funny, I originally didn't want the guitar. It was a guitar that was built, I think, in the year 2007 by Grover Jackson, Mike Shannon. It's basically the original Charvel team that built the Charvels in the late 70s for like Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, all those guys. They basically had come together under Fender, and they did some limited run where they would build by hand every guitar together as a team. And the guitars were sold at some outrageous amount of money, like $18,000 or something.
Oh my God.
But the problem was, because they were so expensive, none of them sold. So there happened to be one in the warehouse sitting, almost like in its coffin, since 2007. Mike Tempesta is a good friend of mine. He's the artist rep for Charvel, EVH for Van Halen's guitar line, and Jackson guitars. And he kept calling me and said, you've got to come down. And he would text me pictures. I was like, dude, no. That's lame. I'm not playing some guitar with, splattered paint all over it to look like blood, like just not happening. So one day I was down there, and he goes, you've got to play this. Sorry, just bring it out, whatever, right? So he brings it out. I pick it up, played it for 2 seconds, and oh my God, the guitar plays for me. Not only does it play so well, you can shred on the thing without even trying, but it sounds amazing. It has this beautiful resonant sound, very ambient, sustains for days. It has this beautiful bell harmonic top end to it, but at the same time sounds very fat. And then I plugged it in, and I was like, all right. And I haven't put the guitar down since. So, like I said, probably... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, no, as a guitar player, like Charvel's a guitar I've never owned, but I have friends who own them, and I've picked them up in a million guitar stores, and it's just one of those, like, at some point I have to own one, because you're exactly right. They sound amazing. I mean, I'll never forget, I went into a guitar store with a friend of mine who's a producer, and we both were eyeing this, I picked up the Charvel. I'm like, let's see what a Charvel's all about. And I go, oh my God, I plugged it into a 5150, which is typically what I play through. And I mean, that's usually the benchmark. It's like, if it sounds good through this, it's going to sound good through anything. Right? So, plugging through that, and I'm
that's interesting.
So, I'm into that more high gain kind of sound, 5150s or Rev or like a Marshall JVM, that kind of sound.
Yeah. Well, Charvels, you got to be careful with that. So remember, mine are all custom made in the custom shop, hand built. So obviously, as all guitar lines kind of sometimes suffer quality because of mass production, I don't know what you're playing up there. There's our Charvels I've picked up in the stores, just like Fenders and Ibanez, we go, ew, no, not even close, right? So the Charvels I have, I mean, once you pick it up, you go, oh, I get it. It melts in your hand. It plays so well. And, and my guitars too, I don't know about you, but I'm an anti-Floyd guy. Even though I have some of them with Floyds, I hate Floyd Rose. I like vintage bridges for me, if I'm going to use anything. So, and it's interesting too, because most of Venom is actually my 1958 Les Paul, which it's just, hardtail. But, for the most part, I like old vintage bridges. You have to do a lot of tricks to keep them in tune if you're using the bar. But I think they sound 100 times better. They feel better, at least to me.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to deal with that nut down there with all the lockers on it, too. So there's that part.
And the tension. And what about when you cut off the string to run, you cut the ball end off. So instead of going through the block, which gives you another, about maybe 2 inches of string travel, which is more, almost like ringing, resonance, or whatever it is, right? Vibration. You're losing that. So once you cut that ball off and you clamp it in, I mean, listen to Van Halen. That's a perfect example. Obviously, on Van Halen 1 and portion of Van Halen 2, it's all an old vintage Fender bridge on that Charvel, and I think it was a boogie body and a Charvel neck or something like that. But listen to the guitar change. His tone he never recaptures that tone after, I think, record 2, the solos don't sound the same to me anymore. Something drastically changed. And he says he started using the Floyd, the one with non-lockers, the very original ones, somewhere around that record. So, look, I wasn't there, but I can tell you, I hear as an artist, I go, oh, the guitar never returned to that sound.
Of course. That first Van Halen record, you're right, there's something just sort of magical about the sound that he got on that record. It's just insane. But it's kind of funny you mentioned sort of even cutting the balls off, because I just think of one of the, hot new things is everyone going to the 27-inch scale for exactly that reason of necks, right, is to get that extra resonance.
Yeah. Like I say, I maybe I'm a purist. I grew up playing Les Pauls. Actually, the funny thing is when I really first started, I was really just playing Les Pauls. And I love Les Pauls. I really do. So for me, the one thing that's really cool about the Strat is the Strat obviously it's easier to get up higher. Ergonomically, I think it fits the body much better.
Oh, yeah.
It's really easy. It's very, very comfortable. But there are trade-offs. And for me, I've heard Van Halen say it, and I guess I'm plagiarizing it, but it is true. I'm also a tone chaser. I think that if you have a great tone, it's so much easier to play. For people that don't play, a best way to explain it is just go in the shower and sing, right? If you have that beautiful ambience and echo, it makes you sound better even if you really can't sing. And it's the same thing. Play a violin in like a hall, right? Like a Disney concert hall or whatever, and you have all this beautiful ambience and this beautiful reverb, right? Violin sings and sustains. Now take that violin and go in your closet and make sure there's carpet and padding all over the walls and play that instrument. It will sound hideous and ugly.
It's very, very true. No, it's exactly right. I mean, I'm sure I've probably passed on purchasing guitars for exactly that. You plug it into the wrong amp or something and, you're just like, I'm not liking this, And then you plug it into the right amp and you go, oh, I sound amazing playing this. This just works,
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So there are times where if we have to triple track something, we want that real chunk, that real big, deep, especially for D-tune stuff, right? If you're doing something in drop C, well, it's drop D, but it's really C, whole step down. A lot of times I'll grab a boogie rectifier and we'll do that chunk as a triple track on top of the Marshalls, right? The vintage Marshalls. Because by themselves, the Marshalls, that's not their characteristic, right? They're more like the first Van Halen record. But the problem is, what I try to explain to people go, oh, yeah, that boogie sounds great. It does. But then try to play the solos that I'm playing through a boogie. You can't do it. The boogie will fight you in every possible way. It's not a shredding amp. There's just the slew rate. There's too much drag on it. And maybe because there's so much saturation on it, you try to play something really fast and quick, it will fight you. It would be very, very resistant. Now the Marshalls, I use really old vintage Marshalls. Those things, no matter how fast I play, they're already producing the sound before I've even finished striking the note with the pick. It just has such fast response. So, amps are critical. Sound is critical to me, I think.
It absolutely is. Besides, other than the new record, Nature of the Beast, what's next for you guys and yourself as well?
Well, we have still, about a week and a half out until the release of the record. The idea right now, we're doing a lot of promotion in Japan, Australia, here. So, obviously we're on, I guess you call it kind of like the press tour thing, We're doing that. We absolutely are going to tour, so we're starting to look at offers. Now, we're still in the very initial stages of this record, and we have a long way to go to promote this. We just shot footage for, we did a cover song, actually 2 covers on this record, which were a lot of fun. Yeah, we did Black Sabbath, Symptom of the Universe, and then we did Phantom of the Opera. And so we shot music videos for those, so we're going to be doing editing, all of that stuff to get that stuff ready. And that's it. And then, so really our eyes are, if we're going farther out, our eyes are on touring, live.
That's. I was actually going to comment on that too. Is doing Phantom of the Opera from Nightwish. I think that'll be an interesting way to capture some newer fans because there's a whole group of kids now who know nothing of Black Sabbath, but will be all over that Nightwish cover. You know what I mean? So.
Right. Well, hold on. You get careful on that one. So we said Nightwish cover. So Black Sabbath, Symptom of the Universe, but Nightwish is not Phantom of the Opera. Phantom of the Opera is Andrew Lloyd Webber. Nightwish did the cover of it. And by the way, I love the Nightwish version. So they're 2 separate things. Phantom of the Opera is done, it's a Broadway musical that's done by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Now, that's a song that Nightwish covered. We do a completely different version. And as a matter of fact, we almost didn't do it because Nightwish. I love Tarja and that bass player Marco, the way they sing it. It's awesome. It was a song we had played for years, just fooling around with, toying with it, at least I did. And I always wanted to do that. But I want to do it like a speed metal version with like Vivaldi kind of soloing and just, have the male do all the parts, the tenor all the way up to the alto or the soprano. And we started playing around with that. And I listened to Nightwish and went, oh man, they're so good. I don't want to infringe on what they did, right? Because people are going to say, oh, you're just going after their audience. Actually, it isn't. What frustrated me about that version that they did, I do love it, but it's so basic musically speaking. You know what I mean? It's almost like AC/DC could have played the music. There's no guitar solos. There's nothing really that intricate. It's the vocals that are insanely good, the orchestration, and I love it. Don't get me wrong. So we almost didn't do it for that reason, but then we started playing with it, and we kind of took it in the world of Impellitteri, where it became a speed metal band, or a speed metal kind of song with crazy stuff that's really hard to play. And we started playing around with it, which turned into, hey, let's record this. After we recorded it, we started laying down the vocals, and as it kind of evolved, I listened to the guitar solos, and I was like, oh my God, this is really cool. And I played it for some other people, like, industry people, and they're like, you have to release this. And we're like, yeah, but Nightwish, they're like, no, this is so different from what they did. And so eventually we kind of conceded and went, yeah, let's do this. So either people are going to love it or they'll hate it, but in sincerity, that's how this song came about, and it really didn't have anything to do with Nightwish. It almost didn't happen because I like Nightwish, you know what I mean? So that was it. And in the Black Sabbath, that was a whole nother one, because Iommi's one of I'm such a huge fan of him. He's just the greatest riff writer ever. And the same thing, we're hearing people got what we did. We didn't want to just you're not going to make anything Black Sabbath did better. So it better be a lot different. So we did. We took it, we kind of did what Van Halen did to the Kinks.
Sure. That's a great way to put it, because it really is your own flavor, but I also don't feel like you guys overplayed it. Like, you made it just Impellitteri enough without turning into something that the song totally
destroying
isn't.
it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a way to put it. Absolutely. Yeah.
We have so much fun playing that song.
Yeah, it's funny because like you say, it is different just enough, because I remember I was kind of had the album on in the background, and I was going like something, because you added a couple parts and whatever. I'm like, that kind of sounds like Sabbath, but what is that? And then the vocals kicked in. I'm like, oh, well, that's Sabbath, It's one of those kind of things.
Yeah, and that's hard, man. That is a hard vocal performance. It's very, I've never really heard Ozzy do it live often. I think they did it early around 1975, Sabotage, but I don't really think they did it much longer after. And, so Rob, I think he kills it on it. I really like this. We've been getting really, as a matter of fact, that song is the one that so far, in consensus, out of most of the people we've talked to, at all the magazines, radios, that's one they keep asking us about.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you say, I really, really enjoyed both covers. Now, the thing is, with mentioning the Phantom of the Opera, I've heard the Nightwish version a couple of times, but I don't know it that well. I just knew it was like, oh, well, Nightwish did Phantom of the Opera, so I thought it was a cover of that, but you guys were harking back to the original.
Yeah, no.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely the original, but then we made it Impellitteri, and we took it into, we did neoclassical soloing in the intro, the shredding's all there, fast drumming, all that crazy stuff. Nightwish is like I said, Nightwish is awesome, but it's very basic, very straight ahead rock. Where ours is it's insane rock, steroids.
Absolutely. And then, of course, too, I mean, you've got Rob just kind of doing his thing over the vocals, and it just works. I mean, it really does. Very, very cool. Very cool track.
Yeah, he's insanely talented, I mean, even Phantom of the Opera, he did the girl and the guy, and dude, that is brutal. That's not easy to do. I mean, this is for people that are who studied opera. Even they have a hard time doing that
yes.
stuff.
Yep. And I mean, he did it brilliantly. I mean, as Rob does. I mean, that guy's just, he's got a voice very much that few people can actually emulate. Few males, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, true that.
But, before I let you go, Chris, because I know you got some more stuff going. First of all, I want to thank you for taking this great length of time to do this. This has been an absolute
Thanks,
blast.
Brandon. It was really, and listen, I sincerely really enjoyed our conversation. You were a fun one. You have great questions, I don't get the same old stuff. This is fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. So, yeah, we'll see you around, and thanks again, man. Very much appreciate it. We'll see you.
Okay, man. Okay. Yep. Cheers, Brandon. Yep. Bye.